Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Players NIL Industry Insider Podcast. My special industry insider today, and I'm very fortunate to have her as a guest, is Christine Brown. Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, great. We just did a preamble as we always do, and I can see already that we are uh, parents of passion and professionals of passion, and we're going to get along just great in the next few minutes as we talk about college athletics, parenting, athletics as a whole. But I always like to get a little personal, and so I want to start off, Christine, with how'd you find a passion for sports? Where'd that come from?
Well, I will tell you, first of all, Mark, I've really been looking forward to this morning. So thank you for having me on. It is an honor given all the amazing work that you are doing, and I'm grateful for what you're doing for athletes. I have to admit right at the top of this that I have absolutely no athletic talent of my own. I can say I've run a couple of marathons, but my interest in athletes and athletics really comes from my admiration of what it takes to be an athlete, and the recognition of the determination, the commitment, the passion that makes up an athlete at any level, whether you're on a travel team, whether you're in a high school, whether you're a professional athlete. I'm very aware of what it takes to commit to a sport, and I'm very aware of what the sport gives back to the athlete. And so that is where my passion starts. It was developed as a young child in two regards. The first was my father, who is also a highly esteemed lawyer. He was a Division I football referee my whole life. So every weekend in the fall, I would get in the back seat of his car and we would drive up and down the East Coast, and he would ref the games and I would stand on the sidelines, and so I got to be surrounded by really amazing athletes, and I developed obviously an extreme appreciation for referees and what it takes to fill that role. And honestly, it has informed who I am as a person and as a lawyer in so many ways. And so that was the first. The second was that I have a brother who's 10 years younger than me who has Down syndrome, and when he was born, he's in his 40s now, but when he was born, it was really on the beginning of the cusp of when Down syndrome was becoming known in our world. There weren't a lot of people who had Down syndrome. Our family, was faced with this challenge and learning what it was about. And my father, my other brother were both athletes, and we hoped for my brother Mike to be an athlete. And so my father, along with all of us, we were integral in developing Special Olympics. And in that we I think I learned and developed an appreciation for an athlete at a whole different level. So that's where my love and passion comes from.
Well, it's awesome. And, I did see the work that you've done with Special Olympics. I did not know the personal connection. So obviously, hats off and clapping hands for that. I love the story about your father because it kind of plays into your professional career. You're in some ways a referee, right? You're fighting for fairness and against those that break the rules. So one of your early advocacy topics is Title IX, and I think most people are familiar with what Title IX is, but I warned you, I'm going to ask you this question. Has Title IX worked?
I think that in many regards it has, and I'm a true proponent and advocate for education in Title IX. When I first got into it, it started when I was working in-house at a university, and It was early on, and I was tasked with, developing the policies and procedures for administrators who were non-lawyers who didn't really understand or need to be well versed on what the federal regulations were. And so my role was to develop a policy and a procedure that they could be trained on, and that they could then take and put into action to try to help, benefit and support students. And what I learned was the minute I told anybody that I was involved in Title IX or that I was a Title IX lawyer, they would turn around and run the other way because, I learned that it's a very scary term, mostly because people just don't really understand what it is. And the general feel is that it's about equity, and female athletes getting the same opportunities as males, but it really runs much deeper than that. And so where I believe it's worked is that I believe a lot more people are more educated on the power of how it can help athletes and how it can do good things and how it can open our eyes to, the potential for possibilities for all athletes.
One of the two founding principles of my business is how do you use athletics to better your life, right? And it's a mission statement that I try and, live by every day. And then the second principle is, what us old guys do, and that is how do you use athletics to better the lives of the people around you, right? So those are the two guiding principles of our business. And, you're a mom of an athlete. I'm the parent of athletes. Um, I can't imagine my daughters not having opportunities in athletics. It really helped create who they are. And look, I always have this caveat, it could be music, art, science, math. It doesn't have to be athletics. For me, it was athletics. For my family, it was athletics. They've used it to create all kinds of opportunities for themselves. I'm a neophyte when it comes to the legalities of Title IX, but I am a sports fan, and I see the advent of women's sports, especially recently, but still over my lifetime. I was lucky enough to go to the Women's World Cup in Vancouver 10 years ago. I saw the fans. I saw those women idolized, right? And it was amazing. Where's Title IX failed?
Um, you know, I so anything that requires change and meaningful change, I think, Mark, takes time, and so if I were going to say that there were anything I would like to change about the implementation of Title IX is the amount of time it's taken to get attention. But here we are, and I think we're presented with an opportunity where we can put a lot of attention on Title IX and really show how it can work and how it can make an impact. We are right on the cusp, I think, of everyone talking about Title IX. Right now, we are talking about the NCAA settlement and what's happening in terms of how it's going to affect what's happened in the past. But if we look forward, I think we are on the precipice of having to grapple with these issues of Title IX and understanding that although we've lived a life where male athletes have been at the center of the attention and have generated the revenue because everyone has followed male sports, we have this opportunity to really open it up for women's sports and show how it's just as exciting, if not in some cases more exciting, to watch women's sports, and the ability for all of us to dive in and be excited about the fact that Title IX is giving us this opportunity to have something to really root for.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and it is growing, and corporate America, the world stage is getting involved with it. Um, you touched on the House settlement. Let's talk about name, image, and likeness, NIL. It's what I do 24/7. It's a large part of, I guess, what you're working on today.
Sure.
I don't believe that it's really been fairly enacted because it focuses on 2% of college athletes. And I say that as Power Four football, men's basketball, and women's basketball primarily, although volleyball's in there, softball is growing. But in my opinion, NIL has not fairly distributed the opportunities. Do you agree? Or how would you view the NIL era so far?
I think NIL, because before 2021, it didn't exist, that in a very short amount of time, everybody had to figure out what it was and implement it. And so I do think it's very limited in the offerings that it has had up to this time. But the thing that I'm most focused on, and where I have found success in being able to help athletes is how the athletes who have had the opportunities through NIL, how they have accepted it, how they've dealt with it, how they've allowed it to serve them rather than detract from what they're doing. And that's really what I'm keeping my eye out for and looking, my approach is to look at the whole athlete. And I just think there are so many landmines when someone who is 17 or 18 or even 20 is all of a sudden has a huge amount of money in their bank account. They in many ways become targets and without even knowing. And that growth and development that we in the past have always seen through the college years, where they have the education of before they become professionals and before they have to learn all of those things, that's kind of it disappears. And so what I try to do is offer the support, whether it's mental health support, whether it's financial planning, whether it's education, all of those things that I think are so important to the whole athlete. And the ones that are getting the offers, they're probably getting the offers because of not mostly because of who they are. And so the important goal is to keep them true to who they are, even though they're getting all of this attention in so many different ways.
I try to tell people that the NIL era, which is what I refer to the time since July 1st, 2021, has been dominated by three things: transfer portal chaos, collective payments, and quite honestly, pay for play. Those three things. None of that has to do with name, image, and likeness. No one cares about their social media. No one cares about their community service. Probably no one cares about their grades, unfortunately. They only care, can they run fast and jump high? And so how do we change that? Like, how do we, because athletes have never been celebrated at a higher level in society than they are today. I mean, we love athletes. Follow social media, it's all about athletes, right? Follow the news. Other than the political side of things, it's about athletes and their stories. And we're approaching the National Football League season, which is huge. But how do we change the narrative that it's not just a transactional, it can be a transformative opportunity?
I will tell you, Mark, in my career, and I've been practicing for just over 30 years now, but in my career, most people who come to me, they're usually in crisis in one way or another. Sometimes it's a life-changing crisis, sometimes it's a contract crisis. There's all different levels of crisis. But one thing that I have always said to my clients is, whatever is happening to you right now, this does not define you. This is something that you need to deal with, and I'm going to help you deal with it. But your crisis does not define who you are, and what has happened to you does not define who you are. And I think that's true for the athletes. Is that I referenced before, the reason they're getting the attention is because of what they've accomplished. But an athlete, doesn't find success on the field without purpose, without determination, without commitment. And there are a lot of outside influences that are trying to infect that, maybe in a positive way, maybe in a negative way, I don't know, but in some way infect it. And I think it's up to the athlete and having the right support in place. And so if the athlete can, ultimately athletes are successful because they want to be on the field, they want to compete, they want to dive into the skills that they have, And so keeping the focus on that and providing the services to really help them and give them the support they deserve, I think is key.
You know, you recently started your own firm. I'm sure it's an exhilarating experience to be on your own, entrepreneurish. I'm guessing that you're going to,
Exhilarating and daunting.
yeah, there you go. I always say, two of the greatest, most overrated things in life are owning your own business and natural childbirth. And I never had it. I never had a child, but my wife had five, so I witnessed it.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about the policy and advocacy going forward. Your passion. What do you hope to do with your firm? How's house settlement? How's the executive order potentially going to affect college athletes? And where do you see your role going forward?
I think that when it comes to going forward, that I think we can compare this situation to what happened with Title IX.
Mhm.
And when I explain it to people and what I'm thinking about it is I see it playing out the same way. And I think it's going to be necessary to have someone other than an administrator or a college employee being the gatekeeper for what's happening. And I think the federal government is going to have to take a role in making sure that institutions do things fairly, otherwise risk federal funding, which is exactly how Title IX had any impact to begin with. And so I admire that everyone's trying to figure it out right now and trying in the I know the commission is working, but I'm not sure that having people from within the institutions is going to be a unified, successful approach for all institutions and for all athletes.
Yeah, certainly uncertain times, and let's hope it doesn't take 50 years.
I
Let's hope.
agree. I agree.
Okay, I've got a couple quick questions before we say goodbye. This is just an opinion question. The pressure on institutions today to meet the revenue sharing model is huge. Any thoughts on where the money's coming from?
Um, I had the great opportunity to work inside an institution, and so I'm aware of the pressures, the daily pressures that come from all different directions of finding the money to make sure that the institution exists to be able to educate students. But I also am very much aware that a lot of people, want to give money because of sports. Almost everyone that you come across has one story or another as to a connection they have with someone in sports. And so we can't deny that is, it's a worthy opportunity to give money. I happen to be someone who is very embedded in the arts and arts education, and I have always advocated that money should be support arts as much as it does sports. And there are lots of people who have passion for arts and do that too. But I think we have to just be realistic as to what people care about. And so if and when someone has a specific connection and they want to give money for that reason, I don't think it needs to be necessarily that we need to go, oh, they're paying to play, or that it's because they want to get that, top athlete. I think it's because I want to believe in my heart that it's because they truly care about the power of athletics and what it can do for a student.
On the tail, that's a great answer. On the tail of that, in one of your recent newsletters, you wrote about something that's personal to me. Full transparency. My son is the associate head coach of men's lacrosse at Johns Hopkins University. And you wrote a hypothetical question about, what is the future of niche sports? Johns Hopkins, for our audience, is a Division III institution with two primarily Division I sports, men's and women's lacrosse. They participate in the Big Ten with the big schools. What is the future of non-revenue sports, Olympic sports, with what's going on?
Well, First of all, congratulations on your son. That is quite an accomplishment. And I will tell you that since I've started my firm, I have heard from a number of athletes who are uh, future Olympians, current Olympians, and the struggle that they have is that many of the sports that they participate in aren't considered, not only are they at risk of being cut if they don't have the funding, but many of them aren't even considered sports at the schools. And so these Olympians are desperate for any kind of financial support to be able to just practice, to have a facility to go to. Many of them have moved away from home to be in a place where they can train all day long, and they still are associated with universities, but because their sport is not on the roster of teams, they don't have access to this money. So I really hope that the right people will understand how much the Olympics mean to us both in this generation and future generations, and that somehow we will find a way to fund that because I think it's vital.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's obviously dearly important to me. One of the things that has been talked about is perhaps some of these school-sponsored sports will become clubs, which
Right.
means that they will have to self-fundraise, which for me means that we're going to need to raise money as athletes, which is the essential part of name, image, and likeness. How could they become advocates for their own team and influencers, right? And so that's
Love that.
exciting. That's exciting to me because the life skills created through that process will translate for the next 40 years. Christine, what did I miss? Tell us what you'd like to share that I didn't ask you. Tell us where we can find you about your firm. You can
I think
you can
I
you can shamelessly plug everything.
well, I think I will just reference what you did earlier, and I am writing this weekly newsletter, Motion to Disrupt, which I put a lot of thought into, and I would love for people to suggest things that they want my opinion on. I would love for people to follow and to subscribe to the newsletter. That'd be really helpful. My desire, Mark, is just for as many people to know that I exist and that I'm here, and I'm anxious to invest in as many athletes, no matter what the level. I have many clients who are at the high school level now that are dealing with this NIL, and so from high school to professional, I'm hoping to really be a solid resource.
Well, I think you are, from my work and our conversation today. Unfortunately, the athletes and the families that come to you in crisis need you, but hopefully they find a sympathetic voice, a caring heart, and an advocate, right? That's essentially what you want to be, just like your father was an advocate for the rules as a referee. And I wish you nothing but success with the firm. I wish you nothing but success with your passion and your mission to positively affect athletes. And I thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate you.